Hello guys, today I'm going to show you how to write a percent as a fraction. Now imagine that you have this problem. You have 13% and you want to write it as a fraction. All you have to do is keep the number the same way it is, 13. And because of the percentage here sign, you're just going to put it over 100. Always like that. So that's how you write a percent into a fraction. So 13% is 13 over 100. The next thing you need to do is to try to check if you can reduce this fraction. Here, I cannot reduce it. Why? Because if you remember about prime numbers, 13 is a prime number. And I cannot reduce 13 by any number except for 13, except by 13 and by 1. So that means I can only divide 13 by 13 and 13 by 1, nothing else. So that's the reason why I cannot reduce this furthermore. And that's your final answer. Let's look at another example. Let's say that you have 120% and you want to change this into a fraction. Again, the rule is fairly simple when it's like that. All you have to do is take the number and put it over 100. Why? Because of the percentage sign. So put it over 100. Then you always try to simplify or reduce if you can. In this case, like we said, when a bunch of numbers ends with zeros, we can cross them out. This zero with that zero. If you try to cross out this zero, there's nothing else to cancel it out with on top here. So that's why now this one just becomes 12 over 10. Now 12 is an even number, and 10 is also an even number. Therefore, I can divide both of them by 2. 12 divided by 2 is 6. 10 divided by 2 is 5. Now remember the rule, when the top number is larger than the bottom, make sure that you write this as an improper fraction. Well, this isn't a proper fraction. Make sure you write it as a mixed number. How do we do that? Is by going on the side and literally dividing it. So this one goes inside and this one goes on the outside. So how many times 5 goes into 6? Once. 1 times 5 is 5. 6 take away 5 is 1. So your final answer is this one that is on top here. Always goes all the way in front. Your remainder, they call it, your remainder is the one hiding behind this guy here. And the 5, which was the denominator here, stays on the bottom because that's where it was. It was on the bottom, you stay on the bottom, boy. And that's your final answer. Let's look at a more complicated problem. So let's say that you have 16 2/3 percent. Like the trick was to take this thing here, this number, and put it over 100. But this is a little bit too complicated to do this. First, whenever you have a mixed number like this, what I want you to do is go on the side and change it into an improper fraction. And try to remember how we did that. It's by going around like this. By going that way, you're going to multiply, and you're going to take your answer, you add it to the top number. So that means what? We're going to do 16 times 3. 3 times 6 is 18, carry a 1. 3 times 1 is 3 plus 1 is 4. Then you're going to add the 2 to it. 8 plus 2 is 10, carry a 1. 1 plus 4 is 5. So we have 50 over, so the denominator was 3, so it stays 3. So 50 over 3. So that's your first step. Second step is, instead of putting it over 100, when it's a weird fraction like that, you're going to multiply it by 1 over 100. So make sure you remember that. You see the 100 is still on the bottom here. But make sure that you multiply it by 1 over 100. So you're going to multiply the top of the top, because that's how we multiply fractions. And you're going to multiply the bottom of the bottom. So 50 times 1 is 50. 3 times 100 is 300. Now what did we say about zeros? I have a 0 here and I have a 0 there. So therefore I can cross out. Again, make sure that you know 3 times 100 is actually 300. All I did is 3 times 1, which is 3, and I kept the 2 zeros, so 300. Now, if I cross out a 0 on top and a 0 on the bottom, what do I have left? I have 5 over 30 left. Now, what was the trick? For divisibility by 5, that means can we divide this number by 5 and can we divide this number by 5? Yes, because you have to reduce if you can. So if I have 5 over 30, how do I reduce this? How do I simplify? By dividing the 5 by 5 and dividing the 30 by 5. So 5 divided by 5 is 1. 30 divided by 5 is 6. So this is as far as I can go. So that's my final answer, 1 over 6. So that's how I change that percentage here into a fraction. Let's look at one last example. Let's say that you have 0.5% and they want you to change it into a fraction. Step 1 is to take this and put it over 100, because this is not a fraction. Before it was a fraction, that's why we couldn't do it. So this is not a fraction, so therefore we can just take that number here and put it over 100. But here's the problem. When you're dealing with fractions, a fraction, the reason why it's a fraction is because you're not allowed to have a decimal number on top, and you're not allowed to have a decimal number on the bottom. You just can't have a decimal on top or a decimal on the bottom. But this is the case here, so this is not a nice fraction. I don't like that fraction. Why? Because there's a decimal on top. Now, how do we get rid of the decimal? Now remember the rule. All you have to do is move the decimal. But where should I move it? To the left or to the right? Well, what makes sense to me is to the right. Why? Because if I move it to the left, this decimal is still going to be there. So I still can read that number as 0.05. So I don't want to do that. So I want to move it to the right. How many times? Once. Because if I move it to the right once, the decimal is no longer there. Now it's there. So this number becomes like 0.5 like this, which means the same exact thing as just 5. Now here's the thing. You need to balance things out. Whatever you do on top, you have to do it on the bottom. Now here's the thing again. What did we say? When you have 100, there's no decimal point here. Where did we say the decimal point is? It's always to the right of the number. So technically there is a decimal point here. So if I took the decimal point on top and I moved it once to the right, I'm going to do the exact same thing on the bottom. I'm going to take the decimal point, I'm going to move it once to the right. In any empty spot, you fill it in with a 0. So now that means it becomes like this. The decimal is now like this, which is the same thing as 1,000. So now your problem that was 0.5 over 100 becomes 5 over 1,000. Again, any number that ends with a 5 or any number that ends with a 0, I can divide it by 5 to reduce it. So now I know that 5 divided by 5 gives me 1, and 1,000 divided by 5 gives me what? Now let's look at it. 1,000 divided by, well, sorry, too many zeros here. 1,000 divided by 5. So 5 goes into 10 twice. 2 times 5 is 10. 10 take away 10 is 0. So here's a trick. Instead of bringing down the 0 and do it, just take these 2 zeros and kick them up. So it's 200. So your final answer here is 1 over 200. Again, there's other ways of doing that division, but that's the fastest way of doing it, really. So 1 over 200 is your fraction here. So that's how you change a decimal into a fraction. Thanks for watching and make sure you practice. Bye.